Good evening, everyone. We are holding in the middle of of chapter 13, just to summarize very briefly what we studied thus far. In the first part, we discussed that even by a Beinoni, meaning someone who will not bring himself into misbehaving in speech, thought, and action, he has a fighting continuously between the evil soul and the godly soul. The only way for a Beinoni to win is when he gets on his side, on the godly soul side, another soul, another helper, and that is God himself. If a man really puts the efforts and tries very hard, God will be there to aid the godly soul. And that's the only reason the Beinoni will not succumb to the evil soul's desire. That's the first part. The second part, says the Rebbe, now we can answer a question we asked at the beginning of Tanya in chapter 1. How is it possible that when they administer an oath to the soul prior to descending to the universe, the soul is told, even if the following, even if the entire world tells you you are a tzaddik, you're perfect, consider yourself like a rasha. It's kind of demeaning, it's kind of depressing to think I'm a wicked person. Says the Rebbe, it doesn't say consider yourself to be a rasha, but like a rasha, ke rasha. Like a rasha means that you realize just like a wicked person has two fighting souls in his body, you as a tzaddik, perhaps you do behave in your speech, thought, and action like a tzaddik, but internally you have two souls, and therefore that are fighting opposite each other, and therefore you need to stand guard. As we'll discover, it's very, very important to know the reality, the truth. So the fact that everybody tells you you're a tzaddik, you're righteous, is because they see your action, they see the way you speak, the way you conduct yourself. You go to synagogue, you keep kosher, you help people, you socialize with the right people, you study Torah. But perhaps this all is because you're a Beinoni. And a Beinoni is put at bay, is able to control the animal soul. But at a moment's notice, the animal soul can burst out with energy and cause the person to derail, to fail. And therefore, you need to consider yourself like a rasha, meaning internally realize you have two souls, just like a wicked person. I think that one of the principles of those who are addicted or go to AA meetings is that I need the help. I cannot do it myself. All their life, 10 years. Somebody I know is celebrating 20 years this coming December, and he is as humble as the first day, because one time he's afraid, one time he can give up, and then he lost it. That's the exact metaphor for the Beinoni. The Beinoni is someone who is holding back from giving into an addiction, which is an urge by the animal soul to lash out, to tell a lie, to not keep kosher, to not celebrate holiday, to not follow the Torah. Even if he does the right way, you need to stand on guard and realize it may happen any moment. And that's what gives the men the ability to overcome and fight, knowing that it can happen any moment. And that's why before the soul is descending into the body, the soul is being sworn to consider itself like a rasha, like a wicked person, meaning internally is like a wicked person, even though externally in his garments, spiritual garments, they are thought, speech, and action is perfect.
Does a tzaddik have to remind himself?
No, because a tzaddik is a whole different beast. The tzaddik does not possess the animal soul. Because he does not possess the animal soul, we've discussed it several times, he does not face those challenges. He does not have an animal soul to fight.
He must have other challenges.
He will have other challenges, other purposes in life. but not the challenge we all face. That's why we study that a tzaddik is someone who was sent by God to a specific place in a specific time for a specific mission, which is much different than the rest of the ordinary people.
In the second level, tzaddik.
What?
The second level is Ra.
There are two types of tzaddik, but in both cases, there is no challenge. In one case, the highest level is someone who have eradicated evil. The other one is in such good control over the animal soul that the animal soul is about to die. It's on its last breath, so to say. It's still around, never tries to get up and cause havoc.
This takes off the subject that I'm compelled to ask. The concept of the person who is a lamed vav, is that higher than tzaddik?
It is one of those tzaddiks. Now, the next topic the rabbi is going to speak about is it possible for a rabbi who has a long beard, longer than mine, and wears black and study Torah all day, to be a Rasha or to be a Beinoni? And the rabbi, this is a synopsis of what we're going to study. The rabbi tells us that a rabbi and a tzaddik are two separate entities and they have nothing to do with each other. In other words, you can be a rabbi, but still a Rasha rabbi. You can be a tzaddik and you don't have to be a rabbi. In other words, being a rabbi, which is defined by the way we dress, the way we speak, our background, our activities do in day-to-day life, does not entail tzaddik. He can still be a person who possesses both souls and they continuously fighting. The fact that you see him behave like a pious man is because he was raised that way. He continuously fighting back the urge to misbehave. Why is it important to know that? Because the rabbi needs to be aware that he can fail like every other person. So when we find in the news and we hear about people who were supposed to be the leaders of the Jewish community, supposed to be righteous people, and unfortunately, at the moment of test, they failed, the answer would be they are human beings just like me and you. When I say they're human beings, I refer to the two souls. And therefore, the second soul, the animal soul, takes over by surprise, a strong attack, got some extra energy, vitamins, and will fight and cause the person to behave in the garments as a Rasha. And there is no contradiction because just like every person, the rabbi is not a tzaddik. He has the two souls and he has to handle that same challenge that everybody else faces. And that's the first point the rabbi is making, we're going to study. And the second is, what's the second? Is that just like a disease, a virus, the animal soul can attack at a moment's notice. Some people don't get attacked by the animal soul, just like he's a rabbi, he's a spiritual man. But that does not mean that he has a healthy body. It's just because they've never been exposed to the virus. Imagine you take someone and you shelter him from the surrounding, and you make sure he does not come in contact too close with other human beings. The fact that he's healthy today is not an indication he's going to be healthy tomorrow, simply because tomorrow he might come in contact with someone who carries the disease or a virus, and he'll be affected. Who is, so to say, immune? Someone who took a shot. Took a shot to prevent the virus from attacking them, meaning someone who is fully aware of this animal soul and continuously fights it back. As soon as you have someone who is quiet, not fighting back the animal soul, even if he's at a very comfortable place, it doesn't mean that tomorrow he's going to be in the same spot. Tomorrow he might be failing at the fight because the animal soul will wake up earlier than the godly soul and cause the person to misbehave. Here is what the rabbi is making. Until now, we are page 198 on top. Until now, we have been speaking of a working man who does not have the opportunity to spend all his time in Torah study and divine service. Now the discussion turns to the individual who spends all his time immersed in the study of Torah, someone who finds himself in a holy environment. I was raised in a village called Kfar Chabad. There are certain words and phrases that are foreign to Jewish tradition I never heard of until I went to yeshiva at the age of 13 or 14. The word discotheque, a disco. I never heard the word disco. And my friends who came from big cities, Hasidim, they were raised with the word was spoken. In my village, nobody said it. There was no such thing. Same as a theater. There was no theater, there was no movies. So we weren't exposed to certain elements that can takes down the person. Says the Rebbe, even someone who is in such a situation and therefore he behaves always properly, speaking properly, thinking positive, even if one's entire aspiration is in God's Torah, which he studies day and night for its own sake. This, in other words, he's not doing it as a job. He's not doing it to get paid or to be respected. He does it because that's a lifestyle that he chose. This is still no proof whatsoever that the evil has been dislodged from its place. Perhaps rather, the essence and substance of the evil are in the full strength and might in its abode in the left part of the heart, except that its garments, namely the thought, speech, and action of the animal soul, are not invested in the brain, mouth, and hands of the other and the other parts of the body to think and to do that which is forbidden. Why? Because God has granted the mind supremacy and dominion over the heart. Therefore, the divine soul in the mind rules over the small city, that is, over all the parts of the body, making them the body's organs, serves as garment and vehicle. The rabbi is saying, you can have someone who study Torah all day, pray all day. He's sheltered from the ordinary challenges a human being is going through. It doesn't make him a tzaddik yet. In fact, he's a Beinoni because right now, the godly soul is controlling the animal soul. But it doesn't mean it's going to continue this way, because it can change at a moment's notice. And therefore, just a minute. I don't understand what happened. All right. And therefore, he is now acting, speaking, and thinking in the proper way, but it may not continue. That is, as a means of expression, garment that is totally subservient to its user, as is a vehicle to its rider. Thus, because of its God's given supremacy, the divine soul is able to use the body's organs as a garment and vehicle, says the Rebbe, through which its three garments, namely the thought, speech, and action of the Torah's 613 commandments, are expressed, clothed. It may be then that with regards to this individual's thinking and speaking words of Torah and performing the mitzvot, the divine soul rules over the body. In this area, the divine soul has the upper hand, and the animal soul is subservient. However, in its essence and substance, the divine soul has no preponderance over the essence and substance of the animal soul. In the case of Beinoni, it doesn't mean that it's fully in control, except at those times when his love for God manifests itself in his heart. For example, on propitious occasions, such as during prayer and the like, when he studied Torah, on Yom Kippur, on Rosh Hashanah, the animal soul is not in charge, and therefore this man might have it spilled over to other days of the year. Then, as mentioned in the previous chapter, the Beinoni is aroused to a burning love of God that causes the evil of the animal soul to be nullified before the goodness of the divine soul. And even then, during those times, when the divine soul gains the upper hand over the animal soul, it is limited to the preponderance and dominion alone. That is, the divine soul succeeds in dominating the animal soul, not in vanquishing it, in the sense of nullifying its essence. Even when very appropriate times, it doesn't mean it gets rid of the animal soul, it just controls it. As it is written of the battle between Jacob and Esau, allegorically representing the war between the good and evil in man's soul, and one nation shall prevail over the other. Jacob, exemplifying the good, merely prevails over Esau, the evil, but does not succeed in totally vanquishing him. We studied it in last week's portion, so it should be fresh in our memories. Yitzchak, Isaac is wanted to bless Esau, but Jacob stole the blessings. Esau comes in later. He's crying because he realizes that he lost the blessings. He's begging one blessing. So Yitzchak tells him, I'm going to give you one blessing. Try to overcome and put down Jacob and his descendants, because that's the only time you will succeed. In other words, it's just like a wheel. One is on one hand, on one axe, and the other is on the other. If you want to go and rise, you have to turn the other one down. You cannot have two rising on top. And he says to him, one nation will succeed, or will rise over the fall of the other nation. It's a verse in the Torah. In other words, Esau's success is hanging on putting down Jacob's. Jacob's success is hanging on the success and the failing of Esau. They will never be great nations ruling at the same time. You can have Ishmael, you can have Assyria, you can have Babylon. You will never have Rome and Israel ruling at the same time the universe. It will be either one, because Esau is represented by Rome. Why is it important? According to Kabbalah, it represents the two souls that exist by me. I have Esau and Jacob. I have Rome and Jerusalem in my heart. And they will never make peace, never negotiate. There is no UN to be interfering here and trying to work out a deal, because they will only allow one to be on top. Action, speech, and thought can be either holy or unholy. There is no in the middle. There is no parv. You have dairy and meat parv. There is no such thing in our life. And therefore, if I want to allow the godly soul to win, I have to fight the evil and push it down. If I do not fight the evil will rise. If the evil rises, the holiness falls down. There is no room for the two. You can only have one driver in a car. What happened when you have a backseat driver? It's no good, right? Doesn't work. It's illegal, right? Let's call it illegal. The same is about the drivers of the human. You can only have one driver. No human can have both drivers in the same place. Therefore, says the Rebbe, someone who is sheltered physically, he was raised in a good environment, he creates himself a very safety environment to behave and to act nicely. It doesn't mean that the animal soul is gone. It means that he's controlling the animal soul, just like a person, an ordinary person, controls his animal soul on Yom Kippur, at the day of a wedding, special occasions when he's in synagogue praying. These men have the same experience, not just very, very seldom, but that happens more often. But just like every other person, he has the full-grown animal soul, and the animal soul can wake up at a moment's notice and control the body, and then push down to the basement the godly soul. So being a rabbi, that's what I need you to get. If someone is a rabbi, does not equal tzaddik. Tzaddik and being a rabbi has nothing to do. So the fact that I was raised with all the tradition, the fact that I'm sheltered, the fact that I'm dressed like, the fact that I am knowledgeable, the fact that I study Torah does not give me 1% of advantage over every other person, because the challenges of the animal soul are there, and at a moment's notice, the animal soul can rise and cause a person to fail. The animal soul, although it had fallen during prayer, is afterwards able to rise and rally once again, indicating that the divine soul had not succeeded in vanquishing it even during prayer, for which reason even its dominance is only temporary. Thus, the divine soul gains strength and ascendancy over the animal soul in the source of strength, gevurot, which is understanding, bina. In other words, when a person contemplate, meditate about the purpose of his life and what's really good for him, it will help him fight the animal soul. In the Kabbalah's description of the Sfirot, Bina is a source of Gevura in terms of one's divine soul. This means that the source of its strength, Gevura, to combat the animal soul is found in its faculty of understanding, Bina, the faculty with which it understands the greatness of God. And for that, the JLI second lesson will be speaking, not this week, but we'll be studying the following week. He's going to be addressing just on that point about the idea of strength and Gevura. In other words, but just to bring it just a little bit of a taste. What the Rabbi is saying is anytime you act from here, from the brains, rather from the heart, it will help you in controlling the animal soul. Because we all discussed many times, the animal soul is on the left side of the heart, the godly soul is in the brains, and therefore common sense will always drive you to do the right thing. I'm going to use a simple example we all experience. The doctor says not much sugar. You cannot have so much sugar. The doctor says you have to go on diet. The doctor says you have to do exercise. The animal soul will say, what the heck? Why? Let's enjoy. I'll take care of it later. I'll start it in 3 weeks. And from the heart, it's very hard. But if you say for a moment, let's think, who is it for? It's for my own benefit. The doctor is not making extra living if I obey his instruction or not. It's just for my benefit. And therefore, for my benefit, I need to restrict myself and do whatever it takes. The same is, this is a metaphor to the way it works with godly soul. The godly soul wants the best for the human being. Being best, as we'll discover in JLI, whatever makes me feel good now will make me suffer later. That's the way God created the universe. Kabbalah will address it in many, many details. Whatever makes me feel suffer now will give me a great benefit later. The only problem is, whatever makes me feel good now is very short-lived, and the suffering, the consequences, is much, much more painful, and the price is much higher. If I hold back now, suffer now, the suffering is very minute compared to the benefit that will come later. Did you understand that, Ali? I have a story for you. It's a short story, perhaps I shared it, but it's very appropriate here. Because it is the best way to indicate, to be able to find whether I am following and led by godly soul or animal soul. There was Hasidim try to go to mikveh every day. I do not go to mikveh every day now, but because for years, 10 years, I didn't have a mikveh here. But I would go whenever I can to the ocean. The ocean is a good mikveh. But as a yeshiva boy, and after I got married, when I lived in communities that had a mikveh, I would go to mikveh every day. I lived in New York, in Brooklyn, there was a mikveh every day. And then I had in Los Angeles, there was a men's mikveh. I would go there every day. Aside the spiritual elevation, I also, all the news, all the shmooze that you want, you find in a mikveh. But in Russia, in Poland, in ancient times, going to a mikveh entailed great danger, because imagine it's just the time after the snow season, the roads, the snow starts thawing, and now you have muddy streets. You can slip, you can get hurt, and then you have to jump into water that are as cold as 40, 45 degrees, 30 degrees, 40 degrees. It's very challenging, and some people get sick from it. There was a Chassid once who took his son in Russia to the mikveh because his son was celebrating bar mitzvah, and he says to his son, until now, because there was no heated mikveh, but he says to him, today you're turning a man, you're becoming a man, you're a bar mitzvah, you have to go into a mikveh. So, by the way, that's the same. When I turned bar mitzvah, my father says to me, today you have to. I used to go every Friday. Every Friday for Shabbat, I would go to mikveh. But when we went to mikveh, we went a bunch of boys, so we would play in the pool because there was no swimming pool, whatever. But the day of my bar mitzvah, my father said to me, go to the mikveh. And I went to the mikveh. Meanwhile, I took my time for whatever reason, My father already waited. He held the minyan back because he wanted me to be at the play of the minyan. So by the time I arrived, I got so many showers from people, the elder people, because they respect my father. And my his oldest son is getting bar mitzvah. It was a big deal after the Holocaust. All children, every child was prized. Oh, I will never forget how the people looked at me and told me. And my father never angry. He was so unhappy. He says, where were you? Where? Holding back the minyan. There were 25, 30 people. They all are waiting for you. This was my first dip in the mikveh the day of my bar mitzvah. So this chassid told his son, we got to go to the mikveh. But there was snow. So they had to cut the snow to reach water. And the father went in 3 times and came out because the father did it quite often. Now he says to his son, you got to do it. And the son says, Dad, do I have to? Really? And his father says to him, you can take your time, but I have a news for you. If you take your time, the suffering will be much greater. We all know. At least my experience. If it's cold water, you just go fast and come out fast. If you take your time, you put into every body part, the suffering is much greater. So the son had no choice, but he tried. So it took him it's painful. And his father says, please, just go in, dip yourself in and come out and do it quick. Finally, he did it. Once he dipped himself into our body, he says, Dad, now I can stay for the whole day. And his father says, I know, please come out. And now let me tell you, his father says to him, the mikveh is a metaphor to life. Beforehand, you were screaming. When you were experiencing going to the mikveh, you were screaming from pain. But then afterwards, you got the experience and you got used to that temperature of water. Now you can stay in the water for as long as you want. It doesn't bother you much more. This represents serving God. When it comes to serving God, it comes at a price. I cannot celebrate like everybody else on Friday night. I cannot eat the food. I cannot do this and that. I'm restricted. That's at the beginning of the process, every process. It's very painful. But he says to him, imagine that you wanted to feel comfortable and refused to jump into the mikveh, then you'd feel very good. But for the rest of your life, you will be bothered, you will scream at yourself and your conscience, how come you did not celebrate bar mitzvah with going to the mikveh? In other words, the consequences will be linger for the rest of your life every time you remember your bar mitzvah. In Judaism, and it's not just Judaism, everything that's positive, that improves life, that gives blessing to us, in the outset, when it starts, it's a very painful, challenging experience. However, if we are willing to take that challenge, it will affect the journey later on in a very positive way. What if we skip the process and refuse to do whatever it is? Right now, it makes us feel good. But in the long run, it will pay back much, much greater. Ali, do you understand that? Very good. Common sense, right? It's simple. But this is part of life. That's part of the way to measure whether something comes from good, from the godly soul or from evil. What's the reason? Am I doing something or refusing to do something because it makes me feel good now? Then I should question whether it is the proper thing. If I am challenged and questioned, should I do it or not, because it's going to take a very high price for me now, then I should do it because later on it will pay back many more. Studies show, one of the longest studies done about children who were willing the marshmallow test. Anybody is familiar with the marshmallow test? Huh? You do, right? So they discovered 25 years later, those children who are willing to delay their satisfaction by holding back for 10 minutes from eating the marshmallow and getting 2 instead of the 1, later on they had better relationship, they held better jobs, they graduated colleges, because if you are delaying the gratification, you're willing to sacrifice, it will make you put your life in order. And this is the essence of what the Rabbi is saying here. The person needs to understand the fight is constantly there. There is a war between the godly and animal soul. If the man is a rabbi, he's dressed, he's trained, he was raised that way, it does not take away the challenge from that person, because the animal soul is there and will find an opportunity to challenge. Now, let's continue. And that's the idea, by the way, of gvura, of bina. If you use bina, understanding, you use your brains to think what motivates me to act or lack thereof. If I use brains, my intelligence, it will get me to the point of whether it's good or not. Thus, we are page 201. When the divine soul gains strength over the animal soul during prayer, pondering on the greatness of God, the blessed Ein Sof, and thereby giving birth to intense and flaming love of God in the right part of the heart. And then, when the divine soul dominates the animal soul with its intense and revealed love of God, the sitra achra, the evil of the animal soul in the left part of the heart, is subjugated. It goes under control, but it is not entirely abolished. In the case of the Beinoni, it is so only in a tzaddik, concerning whom it is said, my heart is void within me. In other words, their abode and their heart, usually occupied by the evil inclination, is void in the heart of a tzaddik. By a tzaddik, he has no animal soul, it's void, it's empty. He, the tzaddik, despised the loaths of evil and loathes evil with consummate hatred, as if he is complete tzaddik, if he is a complete tzaddik, or without quiet such utter hatred, if he is an incomplete tzaddik, as explained above in chapter 10. So you have 2 levels of tzaddik, either complete hatred or incomplete hatred. But to have hatred towards evil is only when you're void, the body is void of animal soul. All the above applies to the tzaddik, but in the Beinoni, the evil merely lies dormant, as with a sleeping man, for example, who can awaken from his sleep at any time and reactivate his faculties. So is the evil in the Beinoni dormant, as it were, in the left part of the heart, not functioning at all, not even desiring physical pleasures. During the recital of Shema and Amidah, when his heart is aglow with the love of God, causing the evil of the animal soul to be dormant. Therefore, after prayer, it can be reawakened. Now the rabbi will answer a question that we asked at the beginning of the Tanya. The question is, I'm skipping this, we're going to skip to page 203. According to this discussion, which now follows concerning the level of the Beinoni, who never even desires evil, this matter is readily understood why Rabbah, for this reason, Rabbah considered himself a Beinoni, though his mouth never ceased from Torah study, and his desire was in studying God's Torah day and night, with a craving, desire, and longing, and his soul yearning for God with overwhelming love, such as that experienced during the recitation of Shema in the Amidah. During prayer, as mentioned above, the Benoni's heart is aroused to a love of God so passionate that he does not feel the evil of his animal soul at all. Rabbi, however, experienced this arousal of love not only during prayer, but throughout the day. Therefore, his animal soul was always dormant and he never desired mundane matters. It was therefore possible for him to consider himself a Benoni, for he appeared in his own eyes as a Benoni who prays all day. That is, a Benoni who throughout the day retains the level attained during prayer. As indeed our sages have said, would that a man pray all day long. Now we can explain why Rabbah mistakenly thought that he's a Benoni. Just give you a brief background about Rabbah. When Rabbah's time to die came, the evil animal, the devil, the Satan, who was sent to take him from the universe, and he couldn't because he was studying all day, never ceased to study. We studied, I mentioned it in chapter 1. So the devil had to devise a plan. He made noise in the date on a palm tree, and Rabbah went out to see who it is. He thought someone is trying to break in from the porch. As he walked out, he stopped studying. He slipped from a step. There was a few steps, and he fell and died. In other words, the only way he can control the evil, can control him, is if he had stopped studying. Also, Rabbah was the dean of a yeshiva that was responsible for the entire Torah that continues until today. Rabbah and Abaye, Rabbah and Rav Yosef, were the two giants that carried the Torah on their shoulders, and they were teaching the masses the Torah. Rabbah was also the one who brought back alive a person. One time he and Rab Zera, I think I shared with you, the Rebbe spoke about this famous story in the Talmud on Purim. They got drunk and it got rid of him. Rab Zera died and Rabbah revived him back. The next year, Rabbah said to him, let's have a farbrengen, let's drink on Purim. And Rab Zera said, I'm sorry, one time I died, I don't want to die again. Rabbah was able to bring someone back alive. This is a man that is way supersedes any imagination we can think of. Yet he considered himself a Benoni because the Benoni, there are so many levels of a Benoni, that one of the highest levels is someone who is praying all day or studying Torah. It's Yom Kippur every day. In other words, the animal soul have no desire to rule the body. He does not have any challenge to lie or to cheat, or to raise his voice, or to not keep kosher, because for him, the animal soul is asleep. The difference is that Rabbah did not have an animal soul that was asleep. He had void, no animal soul. But he considered himself as if he has an animal soul. Why? Just as we studied before, they tell you, be like a Rasha. Consider yourself like a Benoni, because at any moment it might be the animal soul can rise up and control you and take over. That's why I got to be careful. Rabbah was a real tzaddik, and he considered himself like a Rasha, which is a Benoni. And that's why he says, I'm a Benoni. I want to share with you some just few points before we get to the next point of Tanya. The next point of Tanya is about truth. And I want to talk about that as well. So why is it important for someone to consider himself like a Rasha? In other words, to be aware the animal soul is there, and at a moment's notice, they can take over. I'm going to use an example for myself. I do not have a desire to eat non-kosher, more or less. I can't say I'm perfect in that. Sometimes I'm tempted. There are certain times that I really want to eat some vegetables that have issues with bugs. And sometimes, there is some foods that has to have tithes in Israel and without tithes. So, but in general speaking, I do not have a desire to eat non-kosher meat. I do not have a desire to eat non-kosher food, which is plainly kosher. In that way, I can say, it seems like my evil soul with that aspect is dead, is gone, because I was raised that way, and I've studied so much, and so many years I've trained myself to stay away. For Rabbi, this kind of a lifestyle involved his entire life, every aspect of his life, his relationship, his teaching, his conduct with his students, with his spouse, with his children, his conduct with God, prayer, everything was perfect. But he says to his students, I want you to know, you want to see a Benoni? It's me. Abaye pointed out, he says to him, if you're a Benoni, we have no reason to be alive because we're wicked people. What Abaye says, I'm a Benoni, as the rabbi said, that's the oath that minister to the soul, even though he's a real tzaddik. But might be that it's only in the action, speech, and thought, but internally your animal soul is dormant, is asleep. You have a Yom Kippur experience every single day of your life. Like myself, I do not have a challenge with keeping kosher. For me, it's like a Yom Kippur every day about regarding eating non-kosher. The rabbi had that experience in every aspect of his life, but it didn't mean to say that his soul is the animal soul is totally gone. Abaye proved to him that no, you do not have an animal soul, and that's what made you such a great person. And therefore, you are a tzaddik. But the fact that a rabbi says, I'm like a Benoni, it is because there is no Benoni. It means 50 good, 50 evil, 50 good deeds, 50 sins, because that's impossible for Rabbi. Rabbi revived the dead. Rabbi was not able to be controlled by the devil because of his righteousness. But based on the way that Tanya explained, it accommodates and explains all that. I hope I made myself clear. There is a story in the Talmud. There are many, many facets to the revealed part of Torah that based on Kabbalah, they can be explained. And I'm going to use one example. There was a famous man, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was such a righteous man. He's the one who is credited for the continuation of the Talmud. He received Beitar. I shared that story about he faked his death. He faked his death, and they took him outside the walls, and he met the minister of war, and that he became a Caesar. And then he said to the Caesar, he says, I want three things: a doctor for Rabbi Tzadok. I also want Beitar. I want Yavne. I'm sorry. He wanted Yavne complete autonomy, and he wants to allow the dead of Beitar to be buried. Yeah, and we spoke in a jela, each one represent that you don't. On Rosh Hashanah, I gave a whole sermon on those three things. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is the one who credited for this, the reason we have Torah. Before he died, he turned to his students and he says, I do not know in which road they're going to take me to the right path, heaven, or hell. That's what he said to his students. I'm about to die and I'm not sure where they're going to take me to. And the rabbis, everybody's asking, how is it possible for Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the greatest man on earth in his time? There was nobody close to him. Yet he comes, before he dies, he tells his student, I am not sure which path they're going to take me. So there are different explanations. Based on what we studied, we can explain what he meant to say is that perhaps the reason I was so perfect is because the animal soul was always asleep. But it doesn't mean that I'm a tzaddik, that the animal soul is gone. That's one explanation. The other point I wanted to make is, if we take into account that no matter how perfect we are in an aspect of Torah, I use an example of kosher eating. Kosher eating for me is not a challenge to a certain degree, as I shared. We need to make sure to realize that the animal soul at a moment's notice can wake up and cause me to not keep kosher. And therefore we gotta we say every morning in the prayer, do not put us to a test. And we need to stand on guard and never let off the guard. Number two, we need to understand that whatever the Torah created fences, the rabbis added many, many prohibitions as a fence to not transgressing. We should never let go of those fences, even if we think we'll never have a challenge, because perhaps animal soul is asleep and waits for the moment to wake up. Number three, if we fail, we should not get depressed. In other words, if I think I'm perfect in kosher, and then once I have a challenge, God forbid, if I have faced a challenge and I wasn't able to keep that challenge and I failed, I shouldn't say, well, I'm a faker. All my life I was sure I'll keep kosher, now I don't. The answer is, realize you have an animal soul. The animal soul was there the whole time. He was kind of a quiet, but one time he woke up and he made you misbehave. So don't hold yourself so high. So when you fail, if that happens, you don't fall very low. And finally, it's very important to have a good assessment of who we are, the type of life we're leading. If we understand that the reason we are where we are in certain areas of our life, have no challenge, is not because we have no animal soul, but the animal soul is asleep. It will help us fight and overcome all the challenges. The rabbi now is going into a whole different topic that continues on the same theme. I just want to share with you and start explaining. Is there such thing as absolute truth, or there can be other truths that are relevant truths? What do you think?
I think we're gonna be both.
Explain yourself.
Absolute truth would be that Hashem is our creator.
Absolute truth is Hashem is our creator. Great. Is there anything else that's an absolute truth in our universe? How do you define truth? That's what we're going to get into. Ali, do you have any point that you want to share?
No.
Leon?
I don't know. I think truth. I mean, what Dick said kind of changed my mind, but my initial thought was that everybody has their own truth.
Everyone has their own
And the
truth.
only real truth is if it's mathematically proven.
All right. So the Tanya is going to introduce us to 3 types of truth. One is absolute truth. The other is relative truth. As Leon mentioned, everyone got their own truth. And the third one is Jacob's truth. Jacob, we study it we'll see it as it plays out in the next 2-3 Torah portions. The point the rabbi is making, and I want to give you an introduction so it should be easier to digest. An absolute truth refers to something that is correct today, yesterday, and tomorrow without deviation. Otherwise, it's not the truth. In other words, the only absolute truth at this point we can talk about is God. God was, God is, God will be. If I'm talking about the universe, it's not truth, because the truth must exist all the time, at all situations, forever, before and after. And that does not apply to anything other than God. Is that clear? Ali, do you understand that? Okay. We will discover that there is absolute truth. And I can tell you now the difference between a Benoni and a Tzaddik is a Tzaddik, righteous man, is an absolute truth. Because if he has no animal soul, his serving of God is an absolute serving. Because it will never deviate. He will never misbehave. He will never stop doing. If he prays to God, if he is connecting to God, there is never a disconnect. It's called absolute truth. A Benoni is conditional. If it's conditional, it's not absolute truth. The Gemara goes on to tell us that mikveh is kosher in living water. What is defined as living water? We studied last week in the Chabad, in the portion. There are 2 categories of living water. One is the ocean, and the other is a spring, a well, a spring. The ocean existed and will be as long as the universe exists. Spring In order for it to be considered living water, it must be in existence for how many years? Anybody knows? 7 years. If it stops once in 7 years, it's called false water. Living true water, Maim Chaim, is a source of a body of water that is in existence for longer than 7 years. So if I have a pond here, but the pond, retention pond, and the retention pond has water for 7 years continuously, it becomes kosher for mikveh, assuming the water came from the ground or from the rain, it was not imported. If once in 7 years it dries, and it does happen in a drought, it can happen, it's not kosher for mikveh. Did I make myself clear, Ali? Okay. So what defines as truth? Once in 7 years. Because in our universe, it's a limited universe, you cannot have it absolute truth. You can have close to absolute, or in our universe, absolute truth, and that's defined by a minimum of 7 years continuous. So if I say that I'm an adult, it's not absolutely, it's not the truth, because it is the truth relevance to today. Today I'm an adult, tomorrow I'm an adult. But 40 years ago, I wasn't an adult. So therefore the truth did not supersede time. It wasn't before and after. It's not the true absolute truth. However, if I say I'm an adult person and I'm referring to today only, that's the truth for today. Just like Dick has said, the only absolute truth is God. Then you have relative absolute, relative truth. Relative truth refers to the person based on his situation and his living. The Alter Rebbe would go out of his way and testify that for a Beinoni, even though you put a Beinoni compared to a tzaddik, it is considered false. His behavior is false, is not truth. Why? Because it's conditional. He is today putting on tefillin. Is he going to do that tomorrow? I'm not sure, because he may succumb to his evil inclination. A tzaddik is absolute truth. He has no challenge. He will never have a challenge from lying, from speaking slander, from putting tefillin, from keeping kosher, because he has no desire. He only cleaves to God. He wants to do what's right. But a Beinoni does have a challenge, as we studied before. You need to consider yourself like a Rasha, realizing the animal soul can rise to the occasion and suddenly can take over the body and make you sin. Therefore, his truth in relevance to a tzaddik is not a absolute truth. However, just like Leon mentioned, everybody has his own truth, and therefore, for the Beinoni, it is a complete, the highest level of truth, because that's the highest level a person can reach to, and that's what the Rabbi is going to speak about. The Rabbi is going to also differentiate between lie and false. There are many, many terms to lying or opposite of truth. What's the difference between a lie and a false? Lie has no the beginning of the process is incorrect. It's not right. As the word sheker, lie is sheker. Sheker has no legs, cannot stand still. Anybody heard that the lie has no legs? No? Never heard that? How do you say truth in Hebrew? Amen. How do you say lie in Hebrew? Sheker. Any letter that has 2 legs, straight legs, it can stand solid. Any letter that does not have 2 legs, it's hanging, it's shaking, and it's not going to last. The word Aleph, how many legs touching the ground? 2, right? Aleph goes one slanted and another one coming down. Mem, how do you make a mem? One on the bottom and then another piece of another leg coming down, right? You know how a letter mem? Huh? A leg and a bottom, right? So it's 2. Taf, the letter taf It's two, right? So all three letters of Emet has two legs, meaning it stands solid. When you tell the truth, it supersedes everything. It always stays there. Sheker, lie, made out of three letters. Shin, how many legs? It's only one base. Shin, the bottom, right? If you look in the Torah, a shin is not, doesn't even have that. Shin goes with a spitz, with a to a point. Shin. Look in your tefillin, the head. You have two shins. The shin goes like that. There is no leg. Kuf. How does a kuf go? One leg that extends below, so it's one leg. Reish, how many legs? One. Sheker, in Hebrew we say sheker en raglaim. Lie has no legs, meaning it cannot run away. You cannot hide it. You will always get discovered. It will always be found. Emet is sitting solid with two legs, both legs on each one of those letters. What the rabbi is saying that sheker, lying, is to begin with, is false. Then you have another word for lie, which is false. False refers to, in biblical understanding or Kabbalistic, is that at the beginning it's true, but because it doesn't last, that makes it false. Did you understand that? Mm-hmm. So, for example, river or a spring that spring forth water. At the beginning, the water out there, you see water. What happened if it dried after 5 years? Now you know that 5 years ago, the mikveh that people dipped into that mikveh are not kosher. In other words, it started on the right side, but it became false later on. A lie to begin with is false, is not right. The word false refers to a behavior or a conduct where it starts in the right way, but it does not last that long. The Beinoni wants to do and does the right thing, but it's all conditional, meaning it's not going to last, or we're not sure how long it will last, and therefore it's into this category. However, the Alter Rebbe is going to go into this idea that for a Beinoni, it is absolutely the truth and correct for the Beinoni. And we'll stop right here and continue next week. Next week, I am not sure we're going to be starting. Oh, Monday, yeah, we should be starting. We'll see you next week, everybody. Be well.